This is a recording of an X Space hosted by Her Majesty Queen Bee and your Uncle Owl. To join these spaces every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, check the show notes for details.
Well, actually, that's going to be something we're going to talk about this evening, which is a part of the question of homeschool and freedom. It's going to have a lot to do with food. I'd kind of like to spend some time unpacking that. Just so everyone knows, it's been a couple minutes here at the beginning. This evening's discussion, we're mostly going to be on the question, the value, the importance, the joy, the key feature of homeschooling your children being about freedom, and we're going to unpack that this evening for a while. We'll maybe give a couple more minutes for some folks to show up. Otherwise, we will get going soon. Just glad to say hi to everybody. John, I'll go ahead and make some introductory remarks unless you would like to hop in, or unless you're not busy. You're not cleaning up.
Go for it. I've got a crying baby.
Cool. And then same Queen Bee, I don't know if you're actually eating the entire mango cheesecake. I recommend that. Not because...
As fast as I can, right into my mouth.
Very good. So we want everyone to know, if you didn't already know, I still sort of can't believe it, but we do actually have a podcast of Her Majesty Queen Bee, the Hive and Nest Homeschool podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts. There's an account out here somewhere on X at HiveandNestHS. Feel free to check that out if you ever need the link. John and Her Majesty and I should have the link pretty close to the top. I actually don't know if it's in my bio. Maybe that's a mistake. And so you can go listen to past spaces. We're going to be uploading all our past spaces, including this one. And we're also uploading, trying to do pretty close to weekly podcast sessions to unpack the important ideas in homeschooling. In the meantime, we also have just recently had another couple of guests that we would like to have out for some extended conversations about what they do, what they focus on, some amazing resources for your children, for your family, for homeschooling. We had a great chat earlier in the year with Robert Bordens and the Prescotts from Homeschool Life LLC. I believe Olive Athena was there. It was a rip-roaring time. And we trashed the government cheese known as school vouchers. And tonight is going to be a little bit along that same lines. We're going to be discussing the value and importance of the freedom that you have by being a family who homeschools. And actually, we didn't, John and Your Majesty, you know what? I don't know that I made this official, but this was technically excuse number 3 of the important excuses why people tend not to homeschool. The first one was socialization, concern that your children are not going to be properly socialized. I believe we did 3 of those sessions. Please go listen to those. You will not be surprised to hear that that is a false concern. And then we also had 2 or 3 on the matter of curriculum. Same. Please go listen to that you're not sure if your kids are going to get the best curriculum. I guarantee you if they're in the government federal penitentiary system, they're getting the worst curriculum possible. And then this third one is actually freedom, which is people are concerned that you're going to have too much free time and the kids are just going to be sitting around not doing anything. And there's 2 sides to that. One is that just sounds like bad planning. I mean, you should have like a spotless house, and they should basically have a garden in the back. You should put them to work. It's the only allowed form of indentured servitude is to make your children get to work. So hearing that they're going to be bored or have free time sounds that doesn't happen. And the second thing is that the freedom means that you are free to decide what it is you're going to do with your children. And I'm not sure if anyone really appreciates that even if that's not going perfectly, even when that goes wrong, that is far more valuable than being, I was going to say spoon-fed, but I'm going to go with force-fed. Being force-fed a foolish curriculum decided by bureaucrats and people who don't know anything about children or your children, much more importantly. That freedom is worth a lot. We're going to talk about that, why the concern of your family, quote, having your children having, quote, too much free time on their hands That is an inverted concern. It is actually an anti-truth. What you need is they need to have freedom on their hands, the freedom in for the parents to figure out what it is they want to do with their children, when and how that looks, not being done by the federal penitentiary system. So we're going to unpack that this evening.
Does anybody have that song, Too Much Time on My Hands, in their head?
Yeah, there you go.
I think I will now.
Yeah, I don't have it handy, but we could just sing it. No, please don't sing it. No, no one sing it.
Hell, I don't homeschool, but we do. I do spend quite a bit of time with my kids working on their you know understanding that school is not going to give them the tools that they need. I think that when I heard time, I was thinking more about like the parents' time. That's the that's what I was always thinking about when I heard that kind of objection. But so like I have my kids and or I have my oldest son in a STEM based charter school, and it's really just focusing on those basics, being able to teach those basics. I was just wondering what your guys' thoughts around that are.
Yeah, I love that. We're we're gonna chat about that too, because the basics need to happen, but they need to happen on the right kind of timeline. And so, with freedom comes a certain kind of flexibility that is impossible if you don't have the homeschooling means to do that. So, we're going to talk about that too. But maybe just to get started, John or Your Majesty, did you have anywhere to begin with something on your mind? I might, but I'd like to toss it over to you first.
I mean, I have a lot of things to say, but I don't know if I have a starting point necessarily, and I'm sure you do.
Do you want a prompt?
Okay, so what type of freedom are we talking about? Is this like all kinds of freedom, or like my favorite kind of freedom personally is just to be able to say, oh, this Wednesday we're going to go to the beach, and just go to the beach. That's my favorite type of freedom. Just to do whatever is best for your family on that day. That's my favorite.
So your kids aren't scheduled 40 hours a week for their federal penitentiary system a relationship to the bureaucratic state where they have to be there for their shift. And then if they're not there, you get called or you get visited by, truancy paperwork, or they miss so many days at school and you have a pile of backlog of worksheets, and you're trying to tell me that you think that that's not what they should be doing, that they absolutely shouldn't be spending 40 hours a week plus at the federal penitentiary system box on the street doing worksheets strapped to a desk. And if you and your family decide that you want to go do something else, then you need the state's approval, and you only have so many of those days really to be able to do that. I mean, are you sure that that's wise?
I was going to make a joke about having to unshackle them. Obviously, my children have no such thing as shackles. And unfortunately, a lot of other people's children do have such thing as shackles. But yeah, no, I don't. I don't. I don't go by anybody else's timeline. So yeah.
For the record, John, you are a co-host. You can just hop in.
I know. I just needed to make sure that Her
You're
Majesty
good,
was
man.
done. But yeah, my niece actually, she's 6 weeks younger than my 5 year old, and she's in kindergarten in public school up in Washington, and she's missed a week of school because they went to Disney World or whatever, and she had a couple sick days here and there, and she's on some kind of list now where she's apparently missed too many days. So if she misses any more, she gets in trouble, and she's in kindergarten.
Are you kidding me?
We're not kidding.
I am not kidding. My parents just came down, and usually they bring her down too to play with the kids, and she would have missed like Monday of school, and they said they couldn't bring her down because she's on a list at her school.
In kindergarten. That's
And when they
Yep.
mean list, they don't mean the kids are on the list. They mean the family, aka the parents, the guardians of that kid are on a list.
literally that right there would be enough for me to pull my kids out of school. Literally.
Yep. I tried to
My
convince my mom because my mom would be the one homeschooling anyway. Both my parents are retired, and I mean, I love my brother very much, and my sister-in-law is a person, but they're both kind of flaky, so they just it doesn't. They're not the best at time management. So, like, apparently she misses the bus a lot, she's late a lot, or whatever. But still, she's in kindergarten and she's on like some kind of truancy list.
Yeah, my parents were placed on a list like that for me.
And even what you sort of said there at the end, John, was they're maybe late to school, or sometimes they're just family dynamics are very scatterbrained or whatever, and so the kids are late to school. I remember working as a teacher, and the number of times a couple of students would be late. There were several students who, as far as I was concerned, their being there at all was a complete and utter waste of time, and a complete and utter waste of everyone else's time, because they took up everyone else's time with their terrible behavior. And so them being late was like a slight improvement, because it meant that at least it was X number of minutes each day that they would not be terrorizing the scenario. And then the other side was there were kids who were great, and they were wonderful, and their families were amazing, and they had the same thing. They basically just showed up to school pretty much late every day, and I considered it equally satisfying and not even irrelevant, not a problem, because they didn't need that first few minutes of us doing nothing and waiting around for. Anyway, I just thought that the idea is, so we're being super strict with things like their punctuality, their getting to school on time, whether or not they're at in attendance, and all of that just goes away when you're managing those things at home. And I see you have your hand up, Coden. You go right ahead. Say something. I'm a Coden.
You're a Coden?
We're a Coden.
Can you hear me
We're
now?
all a Coden.
Can you hear me now?
We're
Yep,
all coded.
sounds good.
All right. Yeah. So when I was in school, like I was always late, and luckily I had a good teacher that was like, or a good principal or vice principal or whatever, who was like, every week that you're to school on time, you get a free detention. And so I never got in trouble at any time, other than always constantly being late. But I think that the thing behind that is always about like they take attendance call on that, and if you're not in that attendance call, then then the school doesn't get funding for it, right? And that's what a lot of it boils down to, if I'm not incorrect. And so, but when I went to high school, I went to a different high school. Like I switched cities, and what they did is they put their homeroom as like after first period. So if people were late, it wouldn't count against their numbers. If people were tardy, it wouldn't count against their targets, and their funding. So I thought it was a pretty smart way of kind of getting around that.
Yes, we're gonna be talking about that. I guess I'll go ahead and say it the first time. The bullseye of education, of the raising of your children, is to make them very good at doing something that they love, that the world needs. However, the bullseye of the government funded public education federal penitentiary system is to provide and ensure the documentation from the school system to prove funding from the federal government cheese or the state cheese, meaning it is about making sure that you have all the paperwork to prove what it is that you need to prove in order to achieve funding. It is not the raising of your children. So the thing with the freedom for homeschool is you are responsible for yourself, and you are responsible to yourself, and you could make a sort of larger, more philosophical claim, which is you are responsible to your future children. So you don't have to fill out any paperwork about that. You just have to actually raise good children, and so that takes time, and that will take that you'll make a lot of mistakes, but it will be on your own shoulders to figure that out. And what that will look like uh, cannot look like a systematized federal penitentiary system. It just can't. It won't. Children don't work that way. Life doesn't work that way, and it doesn't need to. It shouldn't. And so there's an important feature of freedom, which we're going to discuss, which is the word responsibility. But I'd like to pitch it back over to Her Majesty, even to John. I have an idea of a couple of things I'd like to chat to, but the fun part of the freedom is freedom to not talk about dinosaurs, but take them to the science center and freedom to not talk to them about the beach and water, but take them to the beach. So I kind of wanted to talk about that. One of them was, I know I ask this of you all the time, but like in a given week when your kids were between maybe ages 10 to 14, what did you do each day? How did you arrange your schedule in order to be thoroughly productive with your education?
Um, so we still are pretty active, but maybe less so now, and it's a little different now. But between 10 and 14, when my oldest was about 14, we were museum schoolers basically, and we went to every museum possible in the state of Colorado. The Children's Museum, and children's museums are always educational, and the Museum of Nature and Science, the history museums. I think we did basically every museum. We visited, what a fun one that I forgot about is we used to visit cemeteries. And the reason that started was because I have an aunt that's Mormon, and so she did a lot of genealogies, and all of our family history is in Colorado. And so she would tell me, oh, so your great great grandfather and great great grandmother had a child, and she was buried up in Idaho Springs. Can you guys go to Idaho Springs and track that down for me? And I'm not Mormon, but it was super fun anyways. We found like yeah, anyways, that kind of thing. So we did a bunch of that kind of stuff, botanical gardens, moms groups and co-ops and all kinds of things. So yeah, that. Oh, I should also add travel into that because my husband does like races, and so we would jump in the motorhome and go away for races. We drove all over the place. We drove Texas, Florida, Nevada. We drove all over the place. So travel is huge with homeschooling families. My brother homeschools, and at one point him and his wife and their 6 kids lived in a school bus, and they did that for about a year, and they traveled all over as well. My brother travels a lot for work, so yeah, travel was a huge one for them as well. And that's the fun part of freedom, like just waking up and like for homeschoolers, it's kind of a joke. It's so and so's birthday, so it's a homeschool holiday. We're not doing any like formal work today, but at the same time, everywhere you go with a homeschool mom is a formal. You're getting a class whether you like it or not. If you're at the beach, you're discussing crustaceans and fish, and if you're anywhere, everywhere is a lesson in something. So yeah, I think that's the freedom of homeschooling is not only taking education out of the classroom, but bringing education everywhere with you. Whether it's traveling across the country and seeing the Statue of Liberty, or hanging out at the beach and looking at crustaceans, or going to the mountains and discussing the different types of like deer and moose and elk and different types of, I don't know, whatever you see in the mountains. So that's my favorite part of homeschooling. And that's basically what our days always looked different because of that.
And you might have a day of the week where you would definitely be involved with some other families, think co-op days, and then maybe, what is that, maybe 1 or 2 days a week?
So we did one on Wednesdays. It was a full day co-op, and so the kids did things like choir and drama, and then we had another co-op. It was wild and free, and we did hikes, and that was some of the families would overlap in homeschool communities. Everybody kind of does a whole bunch of ones, and you meet different families. So yeah, we definitely mixed with families like that. When they were really young, we did moms groups, and my kids tended to be the oldest ones at the moms groups because all the ones that went to regular school, they're about 8 years old coming to moms group, and the other ones are in school. So yeah, we did moms groups, and that was so yeah. We had like moms group 1 day a week, and wild and free once every other week, and a regular co-op on Wednesdays. And then we also scheduled like play dates, or I guess you'd call them play dates, but we always got the museum passes that you could invite friends, and so we'd just invite random friends. We also, for a while, my my oldest daughter and her best friend that she grew up with, they worked on a farm one day a week for a while. Um, so yeah, I'm trying to think of all the things we did. So many things. Things look a little different now because my oldest is driving, and so the kids are all involved in different things. And she drives them around, but it's not everybody at the same time. So she might take one to archery and then another one to, I don't know, volleyball another day, or it's just kind of all over. And so it looks a little bit different now, though. But I have to say, one thing that I really try to, that's really important to us is in our freedom is staying home, having the freedom to stay home. Sometimes I have 4 kids, and two of them are very much introverts. Actually, probably 3 of them, and they get out a lot, but they also need a little bit of space. And so sometimes they just say, I just want to stay home today, Mom. And so we can very much be homebodies, and just having the freedom to say, yeah, you know what, you can skip today. That's fine. That's a big deal for us, and not having to be beholden to somebody else's schedule, because it's easy to go like it's easy to stay out of one person's schedule and hop into another person's schedule. It's hard to actually keep your schedule clear enough for you and knock off on days that you want to knock off. So that's important to me.
But their only value is that later in life, they're going to be working 75 hours a week, bringing in coal from the coal mines. And if they're not trained how to go to school, whether or not you feel like it, and if you're just an introvert, then you just have to deal with it and learn how to deal with that. Like, are you sure that that's the best way to raise the children so that they have a successful future?
No, but so far so good.
Okay. Um, Sarcasm cue. I forgot to give the cue that I was about to be sarcastic. I have a follow up question, which was, you say that that's the fun side of the freedom, and including the idea that you're not just going to go somewhere one day when everyone doesn't feel like it. But what if you can't help that, such as you're sick, you're ill, one of the kids is sick? This idea of being put on a list because your kid's not going to school enough times, I can confirm, having worked for the man, that included illnesses that were genuine. It wasn't just I decided to take my kid out because we wanted to go scuba diving. And so this is part of the freedom that you're saying the child is just not feeling it versus maybe is ill. Um, would you agree? This is a loaded question. I'm leading the witness, but you're welcome to push back on what I'm saying. Is Would you be less inclined to be agreeable and flexible with maybe your 16-year-old as you would have when they were 6?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So when you say yeah, of course, unpack that for us.
So my 16-year-old, she's about to be, she's going to be 18 in not too long, and I'm raising her to be an adult. And so I expect her to make choices that, the hard choices, like sometimes you made a commitment to go somewhere, and so you have to go somewhere. You have to, as opposed to a 6-year-old, they, first of all, they can't make commitments fully and fully know what they're doing. So when she was 6 years old, if I paid for a class, I would make her go to it. I'd let her knock off a couple classes, but I would say, no, we paid for it, so you're going to go. You're going to try it out. You're going to give it your best shot. Now, when she's 16, she knows what I expect. She took a literature class, and about 2/3 of the way through, she just felt like she was done with it. And I was like, nope, no, you get to finish this. This is it. I paid for this. This is a good class. There's no reason to not do it. So no, you get to finish it. So it's because of age and maturity. I mean, and it's ludicrous to me that you would expect a kindergartner. I mean, that story just upsets me, to be honest. That you would expect a kindergartner to not get sick, I mean, some kindergartners just don't want to go to school. They need some more mommy time. They just need to lay in bed with mommy sometimes. I mean, emotionally, that just seems so cruel to me.
And even what are the chances that the child isn't even that good at explaining how sick they are or how they feel, and they just go to school anyway and get everybody else sick. Why are we in encouraging that? Why is there further impetus and demand on their presence if they were genuinely not well? Um, in the form of, hey, once you're sick or absent X number of days, then you and your family are now on a list, and there's a potential problem there. Encouragement to not do what is best for you and your family, which is probably includes not what's best for all the other children and families that are going to be forced to be around your kid sick.
And also, I not just physically, but emotionally, and emotional
Yes.
sickness does lead to physical sickness, and it just tears me apart that kids can't just be with their mommies sometimes. The whole tearing kids from their families just bothers me so much. It's okay when they're teenagers and they're ready to, learn to be an adult. But when they're just,
We call that kicking them out of the nest.
right. But and that's okay. I mean, I don't want my 35-year-old living in my basement, although it'd probably work here. But anyways,
Stop it.
it'd be very watery. Anyways, but yeah, sometimes kids need to just be with their families, and I just have a soft spot in my heart for laying around in bed all day with a 6-year-old. That's okay. They need that emotionally, and if they don't get that emotionally, sometimes they get physically sick. So
Such a great point. John, I saw you unmute a couple times. I don't know if you had something you wanted to chime in with.
I was just gonna throw in. I was gonna agree with Her Majesty about the like paying for commitments. I mean, I'm not quite there. You said like the age range like 10 to 14 or whatever. My oldest is only 7, but we actually had this conversation with her yesterday because the 7-year-old and the 5-year-old are very into gymnastics, and so we pay for them to go to gymnastics every Tuesday, and they really enjoy it most of the time, but there's times where other obligations seem to be more important to them. Like she wanted to play with her friends outside yesterday. And so we had to have a conversation about like, okay, well, this is something that you committed to doing, and we're paying money for this, and you don't get a refund if you don't go and all this stuff. So yeah, and so it's never too early to instill a little bit of that in there. And we do give some leeway. I mean, we're allowed one makeup day a month. So like if they get sick or whatever, then we can like schedule it again, but otherwise the money's just gone if they don't go. So it's instilling some responsibility in them at a young age doing that. And I wanted to harken back real quick to the list thing that my niece is on. I guess because my mom is retired from the school system. She was like an office manager and a whole bunch of other stuff, basically worked in the principal's office. But I guess the thing is too, because I was like, what if, like, okay, she's on a list, then what? Because I was curious, and she's like, well, generally they'll just kick her out of that school, and then she has to enroll in a different school in the area. So basically, I think the school it's their way of like punishing the kids for not going because they're not getting their money if they're like we talked about earlier about the attendance or whatever. So literally, if she like doesn't meet the criteria, they'll just kick her out of that school, and then she has to go to a different school, and then a different school, and whatever. So I'm trying to work on it. I don't think my brother would ever go for it, just his personality type. I don't think they'd ever go for homeschooling. But I'm giving my mom and dad the nudge. I'm like, you both are retired. You could homeschool her. It'd be fine.
Wow, very interesting. I'll unpack that from where you started, which is you you do not have the freedom to take your children to gymnastics or music or sports during the day while they are supposed to be at the federal penitentiary box on the street. So you don't have that freedom, first of all. And the second is you have the freedom to pick what that is. A lot of the federal penitentiary systems boxes are prefabricated to have some options about the kinds of things you will help your children learn, apart from the 4 or 5 core subjects that they probably won't learn either. But you certainly don't have the complete suite of options that are available. And when you are homeschooling, you have the freedom to pick those things. And when you say encouraging your children to stick something through, number one, there's money on the line. That's fine. They probably don't understand that. but they had interest in the beginning that is on the line, and that interest driving them to at least keep commitments. You said you're not sure how early is too early, but attempting to instill some sense of aim your interest and allow your interest to encourage you to stick something out and see something through. Yeah, I mean, I just think putting that together somehow makes complete sense and is something that we should encourage. But I would just default it to before age 12. Everything really is in the realm of exposure. It's not so much in the realm of you have to do this. You want that child to feel like they have to do this, and you want to bring them through that. And to the degree that they say that of themselves, you may or may not underline or underscore that, and sort of be an external force of reflecting that internal desire to stick something out that they were really interested in. But somewhere between age 10 or 11 till maybe age 14, that absolutely should transition to being, hey, we've signed up for this because you said you were interested in it, and I have no problem with you finding something else you might be interested in, but you're going to stick it out, to the end of whatever program or situation you have, things like that. And so that's important to get right. I think age and stage matters with getting that perfect, and you can make some mistakes, and you don't have to necessarily be perfect, before maybe age 10. I saw you just go unmute, Your Majesty. You go
Yeah,
right ahead.
I was just gonna agree with you on that. I think exposure is definitely the term for it. Like giving kids that are younger, you tell them this is what we do, and you think about it in an exposure way. I don't think I realized that when they were younger, but that's kind of how I think of it more now. I would expect them to finish out their responsibilities now, and they know it, because of the repeated exposure since they were younger. And also, I like that you put it not in terms of money necessarily, but because of the interest. I think that's a better way to put it as well.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. The freedom will include the responsibility to figure these things out and then pay for them. So, you should feel attached to a certain extent, and you should be reasonable and careful and deliberate when you spend money to accomplish this sort of things. Uh, you should increase the extent to which the child is a part of that process and recognizes the cost associated with it as they get older. Every year after, I'd say maybe 10. Every year after 10, they should realize that there's some kind of cost and skin in the game when you set out to do something. But yeah, okay. But the main point was, if your child happens to really want to do archery, and you are in the federal penitentiary box on the street doing worksheets 40 hours a week, then the only time you can go practice archery is after school or on the weekends. And if you're homeschooled, you could have a, what do you think, half a day, whole day,
My
couple
daughter
3 days?
My daughter practices every single day, and she's really stinking good. In fact, she's gonna go to state here in a little bit, and if they make it through state, they expect to make it through state, and I'm trying to figure out how we're gonna get to nationals. I mean,
I'm gonna bet that during the course of becoming excellent at what you're describing there was like a 2 or 3 or 4 day period, maybe a couple times, where for like 2 or 3 or 4 days, they just became obsessed. And it's like all they wanted to do with their time. And 72 hours or 96 hours of being obsessed over it, and as many daylight hours as they could manage having bow in hand in order to work on their form and their accuracy and everything. Probably that would never have happened in the federal penitentiary box system. It may have happened if there was like a summer camp thing and they got like a week, and those things are expensive, and you maybe don't even want to do that, and maybe you don't know everyone that's there, and you don't even necessarily like the people or the company or whatever it is. The freedom to just allow them to do that as a part of the process of, you know all day every day for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, we are learning to raise our children. We're giving them the space and time and the resources needed to work on any of those things. I can't imagine I know this from my own experience, but I'm just saying I can't imagine that there weren't little spells of 2 or 3 or 4 day periods where if they could have just gotten obsessed for 2 or 3, 4 days instead of going to school, and the school didn't put you on a truancy list, like that would have been way better for that child. Way better. What would you say?
Oh yeah, 100%. She was looking for something to geek out on, and she was 12 or 13, and she was looking for something that she just wanted to spend all her time and energy on, and it ended up being archery, which was really cool. And I've watched her over the course of time kind of lose interest and then gain it. Like, it's funny because I've learned a lot about how people learn, and she that's exactly what she does. She'll drop it for like a week, then all of a sudden she's out there, you know, for 3 straight days just drilling, like just drilling as much as she can. And I'm so glad that she doesn't have the distraction of having to fill out paperwork after paperwork after paperwork of just worksheets. And she's brilliant. She's a brilliant kid. She would do really well actually in a normal classroom setting. She learns really, really quickly and really easily, but it wouldn't benefit her because she needed that ability to just go all in on something and just completely geek out on something. And archery was it, and it's just been really fun to watch.
Can I ask you a question? Did you have a thing that you geeked out on around age 12?
Yeah, music.
What part? Singing, writing, singing and dancing?
um,
Musicals?
musicals, yeah. Choir, violin, then so I went from violin to piano. My violin got stolen when I was, I think, 14, and then I started playing piano. And I'd had piano lessons when I was younger, up until like age 5 or 6. I was pretty young, so I remembered some of it, but I mostly knew how to read music from playing violin and from playing the stand-up bass. And so I applied that over to piano when my violin was stolen. And so I played stand-up bass in the orchestra and then piano at home. And I was also in choir. And then everything kind of shifted from classical to music to more like punk rock and stuff like that. And then I geeked out on that kind of stuff, which was a waste of my time. And I realized it eventually. And yeah, but that's basically music took up all my time and energy at that age.
I'm going to ask a few more people, but Adi, I see your hand up. You're welcome to chat. What's up?
Hey guys, really enjoyed the conversation. I'm new to this whole space, and so I'm just super curious. It may not be relevant to the topic today, but the question I had was how many hours per day of attention is needed to homeschool one child, and how does this change over time? I assume at some point you can tell the kid to go do your thing, study this, and there's some independence there. But yeah, so just like how much effort and how does that change from like grade 1 onwards?
You want to take that away?
I love this question.
Go, John.
Oh, I was just saying I love the question. Are you sure you don't want it? I learned
I
it
mean,
from you guys.
I mean, go for it.
Well, I'll give a short answer and then you guys can elaborate. But it's as much time as the kid wants to uh, give to it. I mean, the steering away from worksheets and everything. I mean, if your kid loses interest in whatever they're currently working on or doing, like during the day, if you're working on math and they are no longer interested in it, they're not going to learn it right then and there. Just like any of us, if we're not paying attention, if we're bored, we're not going to learn the thing. So, and it obviously depends on age and what your expectations are should be equivalent to how old they are. But yeah, just, you devote as much time as the kid is willing to give.
I pick up at the age versus stage question. You go ahead, Your Majesty.
Okay. So I would say, yeah, I agree with that for sure. And I would also, I wonder what you consider education. So formal, sitting down, doing a worksheet. I wouldn't do a whole lot of that in elementary school, and maybe a little more as they get older. My kids, I at this point they are 11 to 16, and I don't, like you said, like you were saying, I can just tell them I need you to do this and that and this and that, and it's actually pretty minimal even now because they've developed their own interests. And when I basically have them uh, read something, write something, and do some math. And that's pretty much all I have for them right now. But they've developed their own interests so that they are learning other things on the side that inspire them. And so today, I think they spent about an hour doing their homework. Um, I have my son. He has to do math. Bible study is his reading and writing. So he has a Bible study like where he reads and then he answers questions for the day. And then I made a curriculum for him on Grok for learning how to make video games. And so he goes through whatever Grok told him to do for Wednesdays. And he spent, I think, less than an hour, but probably around an hour. And the reason I said it depends on what you mean by education is he spent probably 4 hours doing drawing and writing a book. And that's just his that's just what he does for fun. He just writes book after book after book after book, and he's done it since before he knew how to write letters. And so I wouldn't consider that part of schooling technically, but he spent like 4 hours doing it. And then like my daughter, she spent an hour doing archery today. I wouldn't consider that part of her schooling. That's just it's not part of her required schooling. But I think she spent the least amount of time actually on her schoolwork. I think that probably took her 45 minutes. So yeah, it depends on what you mean by schoolwork. And I think most families, it looks different.
Adi, I'm going to come right back around to you because I want to ask you a question back. But Free Within Mama, do you have a mic? Are you able to speak? I'm going to send her a mic.
I think I already have a couple times. She may not be
Okay,
able
all good. If you can't chat, that's all good too. And so, Adi, yeah, part of the question I'd have is it does depend on the age, the stage of what, how advanced, how serious is the academic work that we're talking. Did you want to narrow that down, or did you just have a general question?
Yeah, it was more general. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So I was going to unpack it a little bit, but I think Freewheelin' Mama has a microphone now. You're welcome to hop in with your answer.
Yeah, I think, like has already been said, it depends on the age of the kid. And I may have to pop out for a second. I got one yelling at me.
No worries. Yeah, sorry. All good. All good. So I was going to pick up on your original question. Fundamentally, it's how much time does the child need to devote to the quote concern of education? And I think I'd flip that to the parent side. How much time does the parent have to devote to making sure that the child is getting a good education? And so I'd like to say that at the earliest stage or stages, maybe between we'll say age 4 until about age 10 or 11 or 12, about an hour a week. I'm going to say that one more time. About an hour a week for anything that sounds or looks like a subject in school. So that might be reading, writing, arithmetic, geometry, spatial awareness, learning certain geography, perhaps anything that is genuinely meant to apply to an academic discipline of any kind. If you're 7 years old, about 15 minutes a day of that is all you should ever be worried about. And I don't even mean every day. I mean on average, because with the freedom that comes with homeschooling, you get to take care of their human character, their humanity, something that takes a lot more time and is not about worksheets. And so, a good marker for me, especially prior to maybe age 8, is do they clean up after themselves? Do they know how to cook? Do they know how to clean? Do they know how to paint? Do they know how to draw? Do they know how to make something cool? Do they know how to run around outside and get along? Um, that is work. That is education. That is raising a human that will be a good human later in life. And man, that should take up 90% of the time. And if you get around to maybe chatting a little bit about some sciencey idea or doing a little bit of numbers and math and maybe have them read, the label of their favorite gummy bears. I'm being silly a little bit, but I'm not, because when it comes to the academic nature of learning, they don't even really have a mind that can handle that yet. They're not really learning things at an academic level. They're learning things at a very rudimentary level. But guess what they are definitely learning is, what kind of a human am I supposed to be? How am I supposed to act while I'm in this room? How am I supposed to handle other people? How am I supposed to interact with other people? Um, in fact, how am I supposed to be when I'm in my own bedroom versus when I'm in the kitchen versus when I'm at the grocery store versus when I'm at the park versus when I'm at the museum? Guess what? You can't act the same in all of those places. And that really actually is what they're learning at that earliest stage. Then slowly it should transition to increasing the amount of time that you might devote to things that are related to academics or education or something that they want to learn. And by the time they're 18, sky's the limit. You want to make them work 100 hours a week because they've decided that's what they want to do, is be an elite athlete of sorts. Then you make them do it. But there's a massive transition there, and it should start really slow at the right, aimed at the right concerns. That was a long chat. I don't know if anyone else wanted to just pop in, or if you had a response to that, Addie.
No, I think those are all great answers. And I mean, 15 minutes a week to begin with sounds surprising, but at the end, when you think about it, kind of makes sense. Um, and I think the other thing that's going on in my mind, and I think one of you folks talked about, is that now with AI, this is only going to get easier. And
There you go.
so yeah, if you think it's hard, then it's only going to get easier over time. So it's an exciting time to start considering this.
It
So
really
well said.
it really is. Also, when your kids are old enough, like when they're 6 and 7, you want them outside playing and not doing worksheets and learning about their world around them. But when they're, 14, 15, and they want to like really delve into, or 13 even, want to learn and delve into something really specific, it's really cool that they will have AI, and they can either adapt a curriculum, or they can have AI write a curriculum for them, like I did with my son. Or I mean, they can learn anything they want, literally. Another thing is, they like MIT has courses online that you can take. You can take any, and there's several of those as well. So there's so many things online. It's absolutely ridiculous. And so what I've noticed in my kids and then in my family, that I grew up in, is that we all kind of geeked out and figured out what we really liked to specialize in, and AI just takes that to another level, like, so fast. It's really exciting. So yeah, I'm totally excited about AI in that regard.
Incredible. I'm going to come back around to that too. Norseman, your hand's up. You go right ahead.
Thanks, Doc. Yeah, no, well, what you were talking about, especially at the younger ages. So I have two 5-year-olds, and I would wager that both of them are better at math and reading than their similarly aged counterparts. And an hour a week would probably be generous, just based
Yeah.
on it's wild to me. They've got so much downtime, and I'm like, there's this sense of kind of like, am I doing enough, academically? And and that's not to say that you can't do more and push for more and nurture whatever desires are there. But yeah, the real amount of time is so minimal. Just to stay up to standards, for example, if that's your concern, then keeping your kids at a standard where, like, okay, CPS shows up, like, they're breathing through their mouth and don't know what a letter is. Well, it's going to be hard to get to that point unless you're significantly neglecting your children. which I don't think
They're unbathed, illiterate mouth breathers.
yeah. No, so those sorts of concerns with homeschooling are just unfounded for any normal human being, and I'm sure that's nobody in this space. But point being, like, yeah, that the amount of time that it takes, especially when they're in the 5-year range, 4 or 5. Well, they've been reading for most of a year now, and granted, they're girls, which develop differently, but yeah, they're right there with it, and then counting by fives, counting by tens, all that stuff. Like, to teach a 5-year-old how to count by fives, we're talking about, like, 7 minutes, and then they're going to be doing it under their breath for the rest of the day, and
Beautiful.
just repeating this process. So yeah, it's can you count to 100 by fives? Yeah, and then the rest of the day they're like 5, 10.
Now do it in Spanish.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah,
Unbelievable. No way.
My girls are up to that. Go on, Norseman.
well, no, I just wanted to reinforce what you were saying. Yeah, the
Beautiful.
time investment is scary minimal, disconcertingly minimal.
Also, it's 2025, and we can say the boys and girls are different again. Dins, it's really good to see you. Did you have something you wanted to say? Hop up to the speaker. If you'd like to say something, hop in.
Hey, I just
yeah.
want to say,
Go on, Nar.
Sorry.
I just want to say I love your new laptop, Mags.
Yeah, actually,
Oh,
it
yes.
sounded good.
You are very auditory, Nicholas. I forget about that. But yeah, thank you, buddy. Yeah, I'm glad that somehow or another this new laptop microphone seems to pick up my voice better for the auditorily astute. So I'm glad you're noticing. Thanks.
Yeah, it sounds great. Dins, take it away.
Yeah, I just wanted to weigh in on the discussion about, what exactly we consider education, what we consider time spent on education, and particularly in the younger years, because something that is extremely is at an extreme deficit in the public school system and also in the private school system, which is not as frequently talked about, is the complete lack of play in the younger years of education. So when you have children who are like very early education ages, and we're talking like, children start at, they start in daycare now because both parents are working. They call that preschool when the kids are like 3 years old. Preschool, when I was a kid, was like your older siblings were in school, you had both parents work, and you were 4. Before that, it was daycare or nothing. And it's formatted like a school. There's not unstructured playtime for children. And what has been shown again and again in various different education-related studies is that without that unstructured play for young children, the psychological development of the children, among other forms of development, is stunted. The children just don't learn how to socially interact as well. And there are other things like the amount of understanding that they have about healthy attachments and relationships, how they deal with rejection, how they deal with managing big emotions and big reactions. All of that we don't really think about when we're like, picking out how are my kids going to learn math, which workbook looks the least insufferable, or like what method is going to stick with them best. We don't tend to think about that kind of stuff as much. But that early play is so intrinsically necessary to young children, and it's often very overlooked. So when you're talking about the educational needs of the children, when you're talking about young children specifically, and I'm talking like 4 and 5, where they would be in a school building this day and age, not necessarily what a lot of homeschoolers would encourage you to start what we call school, which is usually more around 6 years old. Sometimes 5 for children who have late birthdays or are particularly bright or would benefit from the structure. But a lot of homeschoolers will start like a formal structure around 6. And before that, you need that unstructured play. It's absolutely necessary.
I want to pick up there, unless you had something to say there, Your Majesty.
No, sorry. I'm going to break
you
off.
as
I got
well,
kids
Dins.
before
Yeah.
me.
No, I don't. Go ahead.
That's me hopping in. So It's a little bit like the weather maybe, and I have this real concern about the neurological psychological development of children by not having unstructured play means that if they live some X huge majority of their life, let me get to the point. Let me say the point here at the beginning. It's the wiggles must be released. You have to release the wiggles. You cannot always keep the lid on the jar of their wiggles. It doesn't mean that you have to let them be idiots in the middle of a museum. It means there must be time for them to go all out and release the wiggles, including going all out and going too far. Maybe accidentally hitting somebody, maybe jumping off of something they shouldn't have jumped off of, and whatever that is. Meaning they have to understand and rein in the boundaries for themselves, and that's going to go from age 0 to age 10, and hopefully by age 10 they've started sorting that out. I would say by age 5 or 6 they're still not very good at that. And so one of the things that the federal penitentiary box down on the street does is it keeps the lid on that jar all day long, and then they get home and now they're unmanageable. And while they were at school, they were unmanageable, and now they're home and they're unmanageable. And maybe they can finally release it on the weekends. But so here's the word we're talking about. This is why it's so meaningful and helpful in the midst of this conversation is the word is freedom. You have the freedom to let your young kids release their wiggles as much as they can. Because if they don't do that, then eventually their ability to put the lid on their own jar, their ability to walk themselves back away from the cliff, their ability to manage how far they let their wiggles energetically affect everyone around them is absolutely terrible, and it makes their internal being very unstructured, very unsettled. Actually, a good word would be disappointed. They're actually disappointed in themselves that they don't know how to behave better than that. And my sense is that that's actually part of the word freedom. They need unstructured, open ended time so that they can clear out the wiggles. And then their being is like, okay, let's reflect on what just happened. Was that a good session of playing at the playground? Was that a great way to chat with, to interact with everybody? And if everything was great, great. But if not, you had a bad situation, you cleared away the wiggles, and now it's later in the day and they're tired and they've released the wiggles and their memory is like, maybe I shouldn't have acted quite that stupidly. And they're sorting through that by themselves instead of being forced in the line at the federal penitentiary box down on the street to pretend to implement that kind of behavior system upon them. I've said enough. Did that track?
I wanted to say, I wanted to interject actually that I don't think they're processing the end of the day by themselves. I think they're processing it with their parents, at least in my kid's case, and I have a bunch of little girls. So
Oh, I would just say it's both. I would say you're
that's
absolutely
true.
right.
That's
It
true.
also get the chance to chat with their parents when they've released the wiggles. Yes, no, I think that's absolutely right.
Well, my girls, they'll come home, and even now, and they're teenagers, and they'll sit in the car with me and tell me all about and all about everything in the world, and that helps them to process and figure out and adjust accordingly. And I think that's probably more important than filling out worksheets.
Well, right. So it's not compulsion that is suited to fostering and producing within a child the right kind of behavior. It's actually not compulsion. It's actually freedom. It's not control that does that. It's freedom that does that because freedom to sort out for yourself the right way to behave, freedom to make mistakes and then learn from those mistakes. It's not, we never can allow a single mistake. My favorite line from Finding Nemo is, he says, I just wanted nothing to ever happen to him. And he said, and then she says, well, that doesn't sound very fun. Then nothing ever happens to them. And the flip side to that is, I don't want them to ever make a mistake. And that actually means that's all they will ever do for the rest of their life because they won't know the difference between a mistake and success.
So I want a quick anecdote. I have a friend that's going through a hard time with her husband, and her kids are going through it with her. And she told me I wanted them to grow up in a greenhouse And I said, that's not going to help them very much when they become adults and find out that outside that greenhouse, they don't know how to deal with the world. What you're showing them is how to deal with relationships, which is infinitely more valuable.
Based.
Beautiful.
So yeah, that is true that kids do need to get out their wiggles, because if not, they will let it out in more in toxic ways, I guess.
Yes, well said.
In ways that are not beneficial to them or the people around them. And I lived that experience by doing things like trying to jump out of the second story window, trying to burn my mattress when I was a kid, running away, hiding in trees when I was a kid. I apparently would go into neighbors' houses and I would apparently go in to do stuff like try and swim in neighbors' pools and stuff when I was a kid.
Drawing on feathers with permanent markers.
Oh, similar stuff like that.
No, it's such a good point. I mean, I think my case is arguably an extreme in the other direction. I had the same problem. It's like I was a good kid. I wasn't acting up. I wasn't doing weird things. I was super vanilla boring and didn't do anything. I was not a problem in that way. Had I been able to release my wiggles, I would have been even that much more settled, productive, useful, not getting myself into trouble. It's impossible to express how healthy and important that is.
Yeah, and the penitentiary on the corner or on the street doesn't do that for you. It keeps
Nope.
you confined and makes you feel like you're already in prison.
Yeah, exactly right. Norseman, I saw your mic go off if you want to say something.
Yeah, just the ways that manifests as well. That will eventually turn into like drugs potentially. I mean it's innumerable the ways that the lack of, and it's such a simplistic term talking about getting your wiggles out when it just means like we are born and bred to be beings of physical movement and to sit
Hunt,
idly,
chase, build.
Yeah, everything, every single thing. And the amount of learning that comes along with that as you're doing it, you're learning about physics, you're learning about all sorts of different things. You're learning about your own freedom, the freedom that your body is capable of experiencing. Just to wrap it back around to the space again, in moving. Yes, sweetheart, I'm talking. Can you give me just a moment, and then I will be happy to talk to you. But yeah, to not be able to get that out, to be forced into, and we had, when I was growing up, it was like, I think we did 3 10-minute recesses per day, and then it was like a 45-minute lunch.
Bonkers.
And we were running balls to the wall every time they let us out. It was like literally racehorses chomping at the bit to sprint full steam towards the playground and see who could get to the tetherball court first or whatever it was, and we just had so much inside of us. And then on the rainy days, it's like, okay, the teachers are all gearing up. They're like, this is going to be rugged, that the need to get out and just move your damn body is so inherent and so underappreciated. I'll land.
Having been a teacher, the discussion amongst teachers at the beginning of the day when it was raining is, I wish I could have recorded it. I probably will. I'll write it all out someday. I mean, it probably could make a comedy book, because just reading it you would not believe the things that they would say. By the way, I'm going to put her on the spot a little bit. There's a Janae. You are welcome to speak. Thanks for coming up to be a speaker. I've seen you throw up some hearts and hundreds, and I don't know if you threw your hand up, but you're welcome to pop in at any time.
Hi, I was just really enjoying listening in. Thank you so much for having me. I actually know Magnetic and KSJ in here, so I see some familiar faces. Shout out to Duck. He's my friend. I think you're from Tennessee, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. I invited a bunch of people to join. My I love homeschooling. It's the best thing ever. My daughter struggled with horrendous anxiety, and the teachers, counselor, nurse, and everyone was extremely mean to her. It was after I had kept her home a year and a half during COVID virtually, then I had decided to send her back to school because I figured, well, I mean, all of her friends were going back and we would just send her back to school. Well, that was a hard transition, and I was having to get up very early for work due to where I was working, and it started much earlier than where she was going. So it was just completely up to my husband to get her and my son ready for school. And she had the worst anxiety. He would have to bring her to see me every day before school. And then well, there were just a lot of things that happened. I worked in the district, and so like I had a lot of connections, and I figured it was worth a try to like write up this, really detailed thing about everything the nurse had done, including telling her she was a liar when she went to the nurse and said she still felt like she had a fever. She had been out for COVID for about 5 days prior to that.
Holy
And
chowder.
yeah, yep. And feel free to pop in anyone that would like to. So yeah, she'd say things like, your parents would never send you to school if you had a fever, which yeah, I wouldn't have, and I didn't. And they still hassled me. I gave them doctor's notes. I gave them this, that, and the next. I sent her to a psychiatrist. I did everything. My husband and I were working, traditional 40-hour plus a week jobs, running small businesses on the side, raising two kids. My parents are single. I can't even, the list could go on, right? So, like, how are we going to homeschool? Like, we just like don't have like a way to like homeschool. Like, there's just like no way. And so, like, my husband and I like got into it, and it was like this whole thing, like we were going to get divorced. Like, I was like, dude, if he's not going to let me homeschool, then you know what, that's fine. Like, I'll just figure this out. Like, I'm just going to figure it out. And finally, after we had all these meetings with the school, and he even went, which bless his heart, he's very non-confrontational, and he went to all these meetings with me, and was a huge advocate. And I don't even know, man. Fast forward to winter break. I laid in bed with her every night. She would tell me stories about what they said to her. Things like they had they'd called, but no one answered, and things like that when she'd be in the nurse's office and stuff. So, I never sent her back after that. I went in at about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I had told my husband I made the decision that I was pulling her, and that's a wrap. And so when this popped up on my page today, I thought that was a sign from God.
How long have you had her out now?
Well, okay, so that was semi-temporary, and then we are trying another program right now. My plan is to start a new one for next year. So I'm going to need to private message, probably, I'm guessing, Bowtied, and connect with you, because I'm interested in a Christian-based learning program. I've heard things about Accelerated Christian Academy, I think. And so I don't know a single thing about this. I'm not a teacher. I have a business major, and a minor in healthcare management.
Which makes you overqualified.
Way overqualified and zero patience.
Nope, I've got you. We've got this. Don't even send her back. Don't even bother with it. I've got you. Just DM me. We've got it.
I am so glad you shared that. That was probably even a little bit tough to share, but that was cool. And that is a very, I don't want to just use the phrase common tale. It is a very common tale. It's a sad story. Do you mind if I ask how's Dad doing with the change?
He is actually doing amazing with it, and he sees a huge change in her attitude. And yeah, it's all clear. Everything's great.
That is amazing. Okay, so you're gonna shoot DMs to Bowtie Queen Bee because we do this all the time. You're absolutely gonna do that. And so one of the things that's highlighted here in this case is how desperately someone needed a kind of freedom, uh, let's just say, what if that kind of freedom existed without it being homeschool? Then, you know, option plan A, B, and C, maybe if you had that as an option. But the whole point of the freedom of homeschool is that's not even in question. You're free to handle it however you want. You're free to face whatever you're facing and do something about it. You don't have to tell anybody what you're doing. You don't have to get any approval. And then you're also not relying on someone else for how that solution is going to be manifest. And that might sound a little daunting. Surely it is. It's that to most parents is okay. I'm facing a problem, and I don't personally have a solution. But it seems like the federal penitentiary system box down on the street has a solution. So I might as well at least try that. Actually, that is shooting yourself in the foot nonsense. You absolutely it should be on your shoulders to both make the mistakes and decide for yourself, because only you will know what will work and what won't, and only you can sort through that. And I do not want to say some of the bigger things that I would like to say, which include things like uh, a country of people who make those mistakes and sort out those kinds of things for themselves is a much better society than a society that expects someone else to have a solution, whether or not that solution actually works. And so, what you're just describing is you could attribute that to how we all needed you to respond to about that for the sake of your family, is sort that out for yourselves, because you'll figure it out and you can share it. I would say Queen Bee, her family and her parents, they figured it out and they've shared it, and that's why she's here doing that. And you're going to figure it out and you're going to share it with someone else who needed to hear the same thing. And it's not the answer from the federal penitentiary box down on the street, because we already have the data. The data is already in on how that's going. It's terrible. It's the worst. It's absolutely the worst. So what you're describing is a lot of people's experience of feeling like, well, this is just my last resort and this is what I have to do. Actually, it's not the last resort. This is the best possible scenario. Tens your hands up. You just talk.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in real quick because I had 2 points, and the first is that if you love your child and you want what's best for your child, you are absolutely 100% qualified to homeschool that child.
There you go.
The only time that there is ever an exception to that is so exponentially rare that it's usually not even worth discussing. And it's usually in situations where you have a parent of a child who is maybe of a mental handicap or a physical handicap, where they are not capable of raising that child without significant help, right? And in that situation, that's extremely unique and very rare.
There's a
I
positive
have
version of that too. Don't let me lose it. I wanted to say something
there
about that.
there
Go ahead.
is, and I was about to say I have multiple friends who have degenerative illnesses with multiple children. I think both of the primary people I know, they have multiple boys. And people who have boys, boys are extremely physical. And these mothers have degenerative illnesses that leave them very energy drained just by nature of existing. They are capable of homeschooling. They've had to learn how to adjust their expectations as to what's expected of them and how much responsibility they require of their children. But I can tell you that their children, one of the families, their boys are going into teenage years, and they are remarkably functional young men. And so if you love your children and you really truly want what's best for them, which most parents do, you can homeschool your children. I do not have any higher education. I have a high school diploma. I've never worked a like a business job. I've done retail, and then I had kids. If you want to teach your children, you can do it. It's like one of those where there's a will, there's a way things.
Beautiful.
And the other point that I wanted to make is that, the theme of the discussion is around freedom, and there's many different vectors of freedom that you can find in homeschooling. One of them, like you're talking about, is the freedom to pull your child when you found that the school system was detrimental to your child. When we're talking about how much time does it take to homeschool your child during the week, that's a different form of freedom. In
Yep.
our family has grown exponentially in numbers over the past 5 years. We were like, we're ready for a third child, and then we had twins, and then a little over a
Heyo.
year ago, we had a surprise baby, surprise number 5. So our family size is like more than doubled in 5 years. And we needed that freedom of flexibility to be able to adapt to my health needs when I was pregnant and not in great shape. We needed to be able to adapt to being able to attend to twin newborns in a NICU with a schedule that worked with our family for months. And then we needed to be able to have the freedom to adapt our schedule when those twins came home. We also moved halfway across the country within those 5 years. And there's just been a lot going on. And the nice thing about that is that, we talk about freedom a lot as kind of like open-ended, right? It's like, well, it could just be anything. It's just the freedom is just this blob and it can go anywhere. And there's truth to that, but the other side of that is that in homeschooling you have the freedom to form a structure within your household that is rigid in the sense of it bends but it does not break and it's not brittle, and it offers support to the household rather than catering your household to the brittle infrastructure of a system that does not work for you, and which in the end, like many of you have shared, and I'm sure many of you who have not shared have similar stories, can be completely detrimental to your household. So, this like freedom idea, it's multi-vector, and it's not just an amalgamous blob. That freedom is also lending to support and structure in a way that's not shapeless void, but it's actually the absolute cornerstone of your family.
Absolutely right. I would say you could summarize that freedom in a way, which is the freedom to decide. The decision making freedom is how you carry out whatever it is you're looking to do. Someone else is not implementing that upon you. You have the freedom to decide that for yourselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was awesome. Really amazing. And I mentioned that you were talking about someone's needs, rare case where you may not be as a parent, even though you love your children and have the absolute best interest in mind. There may be cases where you're going to need some assistance or some help from someone else. Maybe the right word is you're not qualified. I don't know if that's the best word, but not qualified to handle a situation. That's actually true on the positive side too. Maybe you finally get a 12 or 13-year-old and they are absolutely geeking out on something that is really complicated, and so you're not qualified to make them excellent at that thing, and so you need to get them in front of someone who can help them as far as the word maybe apprenticeship or training to become excellent at something that they're learning how to be good at. There's a positive and a negative side to that, but the bulk of that, the foundation and the thing that never goes away, it's a foundation, which means you don't ever graduate from it, is that the fundamental source of responsibility for getting all of that done, whether it ends up being you or not, is going to be the parents who understand and love their children and are free and therefore responsible to figure out what their children need. Quick housekeeping. We usually stop at 20:30 Eastern time. That's 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. I say stop. It's not like a hard stop. We can keep going for a few more minutes, but just letting everyone know we may wrap it up here soon just to take care of everyone's time. But does anyone have any final thoughts or uh,
Hi there. I'm so sorry. My phone died. I've been running around like crazy and left my external charger elsewhere and then got disconnected right when I wanted to hear what she was touching on. But I have a feeling
yeah,
I know what she was going to say. And that is, I have several friends that have severely autistic kids and they need to be in a public school. because they get the funding and they have the resources and they have the programs for that. And I've worked a lot with kids that have had, all the way to, goodness, like severe disabilities, like wheelchair bound. I was like a peer tutor in middle school, so I volunteered to work in that area. So I'm pretty well aware of that. And as far as my daughter goes, it's really just school anxiety. Like, otherwise, she's the most outgoing girl there ever is. She has a billion friends. She, everything's like perfect. And then, like, when she's got all this pressure from, like, teachers and projects and, this and that and the next, and like, gosh, like, I just worked all day, Mom. Like, why do I have to come home and like do this project they just gave me and it's due tomorrow? Like, like, and then it's just like a fight, like over and over. And it's like dude, I don't even know, man. It's just
The
like,
worst.
yeah. And then it's just like over and over. And then it's like, it just becomes this like circle jerk every morning where I'm just like pulling my hair out, ready to like throw stuff everywhere. Like, actually, and I'm such a peaceful person. It's just, I'm over it. I'm glad I don't have to deal with it anymore. Hi, Magnetic.
Hey, girl.
Beautiful.
I do want to say that I understand on this severely autistic part, because I used to be pretty severely autistic myself when I was a kid, which landed me first in a mental hospital and then a school for students with autism, which if I didn't do that, I probably would have landed my parents in jail for truancy and other things. But yeah, well, mostly truancy and just being a bad kid in school when I was that age, I guess. But yeah, I understand. And I just want to say thank you to Aunt B, John, and Uncle Owl for hosting and co-hosting this space. And it has been an awesome conversation that has been had here. And I just want to say I love you all, and I hope you all have a good night after this space.
Wonderful. You're the best, Norm. Mag, you got your hand up. You're welcome to hop in.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think that, of course, I clear my throat after I open my mic. Retard. Anyway,
haven't you learned to mute yourself yet? Like, I mean, I don't
Yeah.
even know. I keep getting this interference. It's like, can you mute these other listeners? Because they're giving me interference. Like, I can't hear them. I got to give a big shout out real quick because I see Cross in here. And we know he's only 25 and he doesn't have kids yet. So when he finds a lady, he needs to know all this information. And then I got
Ayo.
a giant shout out
Cool.
to Beauty and the Grizzly Beast. They're my Alaskan friends. And there's a cool fact about that. They flew all the way to Arizona to see Cross.
Wild. That is awesome. Sorry, Norseman, you were about to say something.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to say that I think that a good topic for an upcoming space would be exactly what we were just talking about. Which is heavily autistic kids, mildly verbal or maybe nonverbal, that sort of thing. That's that it's a real different set of affairs there, right? Obviously. I mean, if you've been around heavily autistic kids, it's not the same ball game. And that might be something to talk about. One, as far as homeschooling. Two, as far as how government systems might play into that. That's something that I haven't put a ton of mental stuff into.
Apologies for the abrupt ending there. The X Space had some issues, so I'm going to go ahead and close it out and say remember to like, share, subscribe, all those good things, and thanks for listening. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to contact us, please check the show notes and don't forget to subscribe to the show wherever you're listening to this.